store employees dared to throw out a black woman. 5 minutes later, they get fired. Hello everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to hear more meaningful stories. The soft chime of the bridal boutique's entrance bell echoed in the air as Ava Williams stepped through the doors of Eleanor's bridal boutique. The moment she entered, the sweet scent of vanilla and fresh roses enveloped her, mingling with the warm, inviting glow of crystal chandeliers that bathed the pristine white interior. Wedding gowns, each one a delicate masterpiece of lace and satin, lined the walls in perfect rows, shimmering like promises of love and joy. This was the kind of place that promised to make every bride feel special, adored, and pampered. Ava paused for a moment, taking it all in. This was supposed to be her dream come true. The day she would see the custom-made dress she had designed for her wedding with Ethan. But even as she admired the beauty of the boutique, a slight unease settled in the pit of her stomach. She was here to collect the dress she had carefully chosen, the one she had imagined herself wearing as she walked toward Ethan on their wedding day. But something in the air felt off, a tension she couldn't shake. Stepping toward the front counter, Ava found Mia Carter, a young blonde sales associate, absently scrolling through her phone. The lack of acknowledgement was subtle, but unmistakable. Mia barely glanced up as Ava spoke, and her dismissive attitude didn't go unnoticed. Ava cleared her throat, straightening her posture as she politely introduced herself. "Hi, I'm here to pick up my dress. It was a custom order." Mia exhaled sharply, barely looking up from her phone as she mumbled, "Yeah, it's ready for pickup. You can finalize the payment, and then it's yours." Ava waited, expecting the conversation to continue. But Mia's response was final and dismissive. It felt like an afterthought, as if Ava's presence was more of an inconvenience than an opportunity for a sale. Ava's brows furrowed in confusion, her stomach tightening as she tried to process Mia's cold response. "Right. But before I do that, I'd like to try it on," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, masking the unease that was quickly turning into frustration. Mia's head snapped up, and for the first time, Ava saw the flash of something behind her eyes, annoyance, perhaps even amusement, as if Ava's simple request was a ridiculous inconvenience. Mia's lips curled into a thin, polite smile, but the chill in her voice was undeniable. "Oh, we don't allow try-ons before full payment is made," she said, her tone sharp enough to cut through the air. Ava blinked, momentarily stunned. "Excuse me? I was never told about this policy when I placed my order," she responded, her voice thick with disbelief. Mia shrugged lazily, her gaze flicking back to her phone as though Ava's request was no more important than the last email she'd glanced at. "It's store policy," she said flatly. "We can't risk dresses getting stretched or damaged before they're paid for." "I'm sure you understand." The words stung, carrying an implication that Ava was somehow a threat to the dress, as if she might ruin it just by trying it on. Ava's pulse quickened, but she held her ground. "You expect me to pay thousands of dollars for a dress I haven't even had the chance to try on? What if it doesn't fit?" Mia didn't flinch, her expression remaining as empty as ever. "That's the rule," she said simply, as if Ava's concern was an unnecessary complication. Ava's jaw tightened. She opened her mouth to argue further, but then her attention was diverted. A flash of movement caught her eye, a blonde woman, tall and elegant, twirling in front of a three-way mirror. The gown she wore was a stunning vision of ivory silk, hugging her figure like it had been made for her alone. The woman's laughter rang out, light and carefree, as another woman excitedly snapped pictures of her. Ava turned back to Mia, feeling a growing knot in her stomach. "What about her?" she asked, nodding toward the blonde. Mia barely spared the woman a glance. "Oh, that's Sarah Bennett," she said nonchalantly, as if that single name explained everything. "She's a VIP client." Ava's eyes narrowed, the pieces clicking into place. She let out a short, humorless laugh. "VIP, huh?" she said quietly, her voice edged with a bitterness that surprised even her. "Let me guess, VIP means white?" Mia's fingers twitched on the counter, but her expression didn't change. Her jaw tightened slightly, a muscle in her face twitching, but the mask remained in place. "I don't know what you're trying to imply," Mia said, her tone neutral but laced with an unmistakable hint of defensiveness. "But if you're unhappy with our policies, there are plenty of other bridal stores you can go to." Ava felt the heat of her frustration rising. But she kept her composure. Straightening her shoulders, she met Mia's gaze without wavering. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "I paid for this dress. I have every right to try it on before handing over another dime." Mia's smile thinned, and Ava could sense her patience beginning to wear thin. "You don't have any rights here unless you finish your payment," Mia said sharply, her tone cold. "That's how we do things." Ava's hands clenched into fists. But she forced herself to remain calm. "Fine," she said, her voice tight with restraint. "Let me speak to the manager." Mia exhaled in a dramatic sigh. Then slowly stood up. She shot Ava a look, as if sizing her up. "Sure, if you really want to make a scene," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "I'll go get her." Ava's pulse hammered in her ears. But beneath the anger, she felt something else, something colder, more calculating. She refused to be dismissed. Refused to let Mia get away with treating her this way. And when the manager arrived, she would make sure they both knew she wasn't going anywhere without her dress. A few tense moments later, Rebecca Langford, the store manager, appeared at the back of the boutique, her presence immediately filling the space with an air of authority. She was tall and impeccably dressed in a sleek gray dress that fit her like it had been custom-tailored. Her piercing blue eyes scanned Ava briefly, then fixed on her with a cold, almost bored expression. She crossed her arms, her gaze appraising, as if she were already judging the situation. "I hear there's a problem," Rebecca said in a voice that was cool and distant, as though she were speaking to an unruly customer rather than someone who had paid for a service. Ava's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice even as she replied, "Yes, I came to pick up my dress. And I was told I couldn't try it on until I finished my payment." Rebecca nodded slowly, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "That is correct," she replied, her tone flat. "Store policy, payment first. Then the dress is yours." Ava's heart began to race as she fought to keep her emotions in check. "That's interesting," she said, the words slipping from her lips with an edge of barely contained fury. "Because I just watched another customer try on her dress before buying it." She gestured toward Sarah Bennett, who was still in the corner, spinning around in front of the mirror. "So I assume there's an exception to this policy?" Rebecca followed Ava's gaze, then exhaled sharply, clearly growing impatient. "Sarah Bennett," she said, as if that name alone was supposed to explain everything. "She's a valued client." Ava blinked, her disbelief palpable as the weight of Rebecca's words hit her. "A valued client," she repeated, her voice thick with sarcasm. "Let me get this straight. Sarah is allowed to try on her dress before paying because she's a valued client, and I'm not because." Rebecca's lips twitched, but the faintest smirk failed to mask the arrogance in her response. "Sarah has shopped with us for years. She's established trust with our boutique. Clients like her receive VIP treatment." Ava's stomach twisted with a mixture of frustration and disgust. "Clients like her?" she repeated, her voice turning sharp as the pieces clicked into place. "Let me guess, clients like her are white, right?" Rebecca's gaze flickered, and for a brief moment, Ava saw the faintest flicker of discomfort in her eyes before the mask snapped back into place. "I don't know what you're trying to imply," Rebecca said, her tone stiff, "but if you're unhappy with our policies, there are plenty of other bridal stores you can go to." Ava took a deep breath, steadying herself. Every muscle in her body was taut. Like a coiled spring, she wasn't going to let them push her around. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, her voice unwavering. "I paid for this dress. And I have every right to try it on before handing over another dime." Rebecca's smile thinned, but it was no longer polite. It was the smile of someone who thought they had the upper hand. "You don't have any rights here unless you finish your payment," she said, her voice colder now. "That's how we do things." Ava clenched her fists, the fire inside her building with every word Rebecca spoke. "Fine," she said, her voice steady but simmering with barely contained rage. "Let me speak to the manager." Then, Rebecca sighed dramatically, as if Ava's request was a nuisance. She unfolded her arms slowly, her expression one of exaggerated reluctance. "Sure, if you really want to make a scene," she said, her tone oozing condescension. "I'll go get her." Ava's pulse raced, her frustration threatening to boil over. But beneath the fury was a cold resolve. She wasn't going to let this slide. She wasn't going to let them treat her this way. Not today. Not ever. The tension in the air thickened as Rebecca's footsteps clicked across the marble floor, leaving Ava standing there, pulse racing, anger bubbling beneath the surface. She could feel her body trembling with the effort to keep it all in check, to not lash out at the injustice of it all. She had come here expecting a fair transaction, but instead, she was being treated like a second-class citizen, as if she were an outsider in the very place that was supposed to celebrate her. Moments later, Rebecca returned, her expression smug, her hands clasped in front of her as if she were about to deliver an ultimatum. "Since we're discussing policies," she said, flipping open a sleek leather-bound notebook as though it were some official decree. "There's one more matter we need to address." Ava's heart sank as she braced herself for whatever Rebecca had in store next. Rebecca flipped through the pages with an exaggerated show of concern, pausing only for a brief second before glancing up at Ava with a dramatic gasp. "Oh," she said, her voice dripping with faux surprise. "It seems that the price of your dress has changed." Ava's stomach dropped, a cold shiver running down her spine. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling, but not with fear. No, it was with raw disbelief. And something deeper, something darker. Something that told her that this was no simple mistake. The original promotional discount expired, Rebecca said, not even pretending to care. "So your balance is no longer $3.500. It's $5. The words hit like a slap. Ava could feel the weight of them, heavy and suffocating, as if the air had been sucked out of the room. She blinked, the shock crashing over her like a wave. "You're joking," Ava managed to whisper, her voice barely audible as she took a step back, disbelief flooding her mind. Rebecca's smile was slow and sharp, like a predator toying with its prey. "I assure you, I'm not," she said, the cruel amusement in her voice barely hidden. Ava's vision narrowed as the rage inside her started to bubble to the surface. "This is fraud," she said, the words dripping with venom. "You're trying to scam me right in front of my face." Her hands shook with fury, but she clenched them into fists, trying to steady herself, trying to keep her composure. Rebecca leaned in slightly, her lips curling into a mocking smile. "Call it what you want," she said, her tone cold and dismissive. "But if you want your dress, the price is $5. Final offer." The walls of the boutique seemed to close in around Ava, the pristine white walls and delicate chandeliers suddenly feeling like a trap. The music playing softly in the background was nothing more than static in her ears now. Her vision tunneled, her heart pounding with a mixture of anger and disbelief. She had come here expecting a fair transaction, expecting to leave with her dress. But now she felt like she was the one being scammed, humiliated, and treated like she didn't belong. Ava took a deep breath, her voice low but seething with barely contained rage. "This is outrageous," she said, her eyes burning with intensity. "I agreed to $3.500. I have proof of that agreement. You can't just change the price because you feel like it." Rebecca barely seemed fazed. She gave a casual shrug, as though it were no big deal. "I think you must have spoken to someone who wasn't authorized to make that commitment," she said, almost bored. "Unfortunately, that discount is no longer available." Ava's nails dug into her palms, the pressure helping her keep herself steady, to keep herself from losing control. This was not just a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. "You're stealing from me," she said, her voice dangerously calm, but with every word, the anger inside her burned hotter. Rebecca smiled, a slow, predatory smile, clearly enjoying the power she thought she had. "Call it whatever you want," she repeated, the cruelty in her voice unmistakable. "But if you want your dress, the price is $5. Final offer." Ava's entire body shook with the effort to keep her cool. She had expected this to be the moment where she walked out with her dress, the culmination of months of planning. But now, she was the one being attacked, the one who was being treated as if she didn't belong. She clenched her jaw, a new resolve filling her. "Fine," she said, her voice cold and deadly. "Then I won't be paying anything until I try it on." Rebecca's smile remained, but Ava could see the flicker of something behind her eyes, irritation. Maybe even fear, but it was too late. Ava had seen through her game, and she wasn't about to let her get away with it. This wasn't just about a dress anymore. It was about respect, and Ava wasn't leaving until she got it. As Ava stormed out of Eleanor's bridal boutique, the cool evening air slapped her face. offering little relief from the boiling rage that simmered inside her. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fury and humiliation, each step away from the boutique sending her pulse racing even faster. The street lights cast long shadows along the sidewalk, and the city buzzed around her, indifferent, as if nothing had just unfolded inside the boutique. She had been made to feel like a criminal, her dignity ripped away for nothing more than demanding what was rightfully hers. She could still hear the smugness in Rebecca Langford's voice, the condescending tone of Mia's words echoing in her head. VIP treatment, she muttered to herself bitterly, the words tasting like poison on her tongue. She clenched her fists at her sides, feeling the heat of her anger boil over, threatening to consume her. What had she done wrong? All she wanted was the dress she had paid for, treated with the same respect as anyone else. But instead, she was belittled, scammed, and told she didn't belong. But just as she was about to lose herself to the overwhelming tide of frustration, a voice called out to her. Ava, came the deep, steady sound of Ethan's voice. She turned, and there he was, stepping out of a sleek black car, dressed in a tailored navy suit that made his presence undeniable. His broad frame exuded effortless power. And in that moment, Ava felt an overwhelming sense of calm wash over her. Ethan's sharp brown eyes scanned her face immediately, noting the storm brewing behind her eyes. He knew something was wrong. The concern in his gaze made her chest tighten as the words tumbled out of her mouth. Almost before she could stop them, I went in to pick up my dress, she said, her voice trembling, not with fear, but with disbelief. They wouldn't let me try it on. Then they raised the price, out of nowhere. They told me I had to pay $5 instead of $3.500. When I refused, they humiliated me, said they'd have someone else try it on for me, like I'd ruin it, and when I pushed back, they threw me out, threatened to call the police. Ethan's jaw tightened, a muscle ticking beneath the surface. His eyes darkened as she spoke, fury simmering beneath the calm exterior he worked so hard to maintain. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there for a moment, absorbing everything. Ava felt a swell of gratitude for his unwavering presence, his strength always grounding her. Stay here, Ethan said, his voice low but firm. Then, without another word, he turned and strode back toward the boutique, the purpose in his steps leaving no room for hesitation. Ava watched him go, her heart pounding again. She didn't know what he was going to do, but she knew one thing for sure: this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Inside the boutique, the air shifted the moment Ethan stepped through the doors. His presence was undeniable, powerful and commanding. The very space around him seemed to hold its breath. The once calm, pristine atmosphere now felt charged, and everyone in the boutique immediately grew aware of the tension he brought with him. Rebecca glanced up from behind the counter, her face draining of color as her gaze locked with his. A split second of panic flashed across her features, but she quickly masked it with a shallow smile. Mr. Williams, she stammered, her voice cracking slightly, betraying her composure. What can I do for you? Ethan's voice was low, almost too calm, but it carried the weight of a storm about to break. You know exactly what's going on, he said, stepping closer to her with quiet authority, his sharp brown eyes cutting through her like a blade. You denied my fiancée the right to try on the dress she already paid for. Then, you raised the price without warning, as if she were just some fool you could scam. And now you've thrown her out. His words hung in the air, sharp and accusing, as the room grew unnervingly still. Rebecca's lips parted, but no words came. She blinked, desperate for a way out. But Ethan wasn't finished. He turned his gaze to Mia, who was standing nearby, visibly shrinking under his stare. And you, he said, his voice laced with cold fury. You had a hand in this. Don't think I didn't see the way you treated her. You're not getting off that easy either. The tension was palpable, and as Ethan's gaze flicked back to Rebecca, she could feel the walls closing in. Ethan took another step forward, his presence so overwhelming that Rebecca had to fight the urge to step back. So, he continued, his voice deceptively calm, is this how you treat all your customers? Or is this just how you treat my fiancée because of the color of her skin? Rebecca's eyes widened, but she remained silent, her grip on her composure slipping with every word. Ethan wasn't done yet. I own this boutique, he said, his voice now colder than ever. You've made a grave mistake. The room felt deathly quiet, and the realization hit everyone like a tidal wave. Ethan Williams, the man standing before them, wasn't just a client, he was the owner. Ethan's revelation hung in the air like a thunderclap. And for the first time, Rebecca's confident facade cracked. Her lips trembled, and she swallowed hard, the color draining from her face. The smug arrogance she'd carried moments before evaporated as the gravity of Ethan's words hit her. "You own this store?" she whispered, her voice small, faltering. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, his presence overpowering, his cold gaze locking onto Rebecca's as he spoke with chilling clarity. "You just tried to scam my fiancée. Humiliate her in front of everyone. And now, you're going to pretend it was all business as usual?" His words sliced through the boutique's pristine atmosphere like a knife. Rebecca opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Her eyes darted from Ethan to Mia, who stood there, pale, her eyes wide, silently pleading for some kind of escape. Ethan's voice dropped lower, dripping with icy certainty. "I'm not asking for an apology. Rebecca, you've already made your decision." The weight of his stare was like a suffocating force. Rebecca's hands shook slightly, but she quickly clasped them together, trying to regain some semblance of control. Ethan took a step closer, his voice now barely above a whisper but full of lethal finality. "Let me make this simple for you. You took one look at my fiancée, saw her skin, and decided she wasn't worth the same respect you give to your white clients. Tell me I'm wrong." The accusation hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Rebecca's throat tightened, but she remained silent. Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "You've disrespected her, and you're going to regret it." A long, painful silence followed, and then Ethan's next words came like a death sentence. "Pack your things. You're done here. If I hear so much as a whisper of you working in another boutique, I'll make sure every store in this city knows exactly who you are." The shock of his words hit Rebecca hard. She stammered, her composure completely unraveling. "Please, sir, give me another chance," she pleaded, her voice breaking, desperation creeping into her tone. But Ethan didn't flinch. "No," he said, the word cutting through the air. "You're done, both of you." He turned his gaze to Mia, whose face had gone white. "You're leaving too. Get out, now." The finality in his voice was unmistakable. Rebecca and Mia exchanged a brief glance, their fate sealed in Ethan's eyes. Rebecca slowly began to gather her things, her movements sluggish, like she was walking in a nightmare she couldn't escape. As they left the boutique, the tension in the air seemed to lift. The storm had passed. Ava, standing near the door, felt a weight lift off her shoulders as Ethan turned back to her. His eyes softened as he reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Let's get your dress," he murmured, his voice warm with quiet confidence. "And this time, it's on your terms." With Ethan by her side, Ava walked confidently toward the fitting room, her head held high, her dignity restored, knowing this fight had been won. The moment Ethan and Ava stepped back into the boutique, the atmosphere had completely shifted. The once pristine space, filled with whispers of tension and injustice, now seemed almost suffocatingly quiet. Rebecca and Mia had just left, their hasty departure leaving a vacuum of fear behind them. As the door closed behind them with a soft chime, Ethan's commanding presence lingered in the air, like the echo of a storm that had passed but still hung heavy. Ava stood tall beside him, her chest rising with a sense of victorious relief, her anger now a slow burn of satisfaction. Ethan led her to the fitting room, his hand gently brushing against hers, steadying her. As they approached, the remaining staff in the boutique seemed to shrink back, their nervous glances darting away as though they feared the wrath that had just been unleashed on Rebecca and Mia. Ethan's voice, when he spoke, was calm but carried the weight of unspoken authority. "From now on," he said, his gaze sweeping over the remaining employees, "no bride will ever be treated the way Ava was today. And if I hear of any disrespect, any discrimination, you'll be joining Rebecca and Mia outside." His tone left no room for argument, and the staff knew better than to even think about challenging him. Ava felt a surge of pride and power, a sense of justice fulfilled. This was her moment, one where she reclaimed her dignity and was no longer a victim of arrogance and cruelty. As they entered the fitting room, she took a deep breath, the last remnants of frustration melting away as she approached the dress. Ethan stood by her side, his gaze softening, offering the silent promise that no one would ever diminish her again. With a steady hand, Ava reached for the gown that had caused so much heartache, but now represented something far greater, a victory not just over the boutique, but over every barrier, every slight, every time she had been made to feel less than. This was her day, her dress, her moment, and she was finally going to walk down that aisle as she deserved, empowered, unbroken, and unapologetically herself.